When Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before the people of Burkina Faso and promised free, clean water for every citizen, even his closest allies whispered that it was impossible. His enemies laughed. But months later, the ground shook, the earth split open, and what happened next changed Africa forever. The dry season had arrived in Burkina Faso. Rivers shrank to dusty scars on the land. Wells produced only drops. In some villages, women walked 6 hours a day for water. Even then, the water was brown, unsafe. Diseases spread faster than hope. Ibrahim Traoré, the young captain turned leader, knew this pain personally. He had grown up watching his mother struggle to find water. He remembered carrying heavy buckets as a child, and he remembered the sickness that claimed his cousin's life. One evening, Traoré called his cabinet to the presidential office. The air was tense. "We will give free water to every citizen," he declared. Silence filled the room. Some ministers looked away. Others shook their heads in disbelief. One advisor whispered, "It's not possible, Captain." Traoré's eyes burned with determination. Everything is possible when the people's lives are at stake. But outside that room, rumors spread fast. The opposition mocked him. Radio hosts laughed on air. "The captain thinks he's Moses now?" one joked. Foreign analysts wrote scathing articles. A fantasy, they called it. Aid agencies doubted him. Too expensive, too logistically complex, they claimed. Even some villagers were skeptical. "Politicians always promise," one elder muttered. "They never deliver." But Traoré was not just talking, he was planning, in silence. First, he sent engineers to map underground water sources. They discovered aquifers deep beneath the Sahel, sources untouched for centuries. Then he ordered drilling rigs from allied nations. Quietly, massive machinery began arriving at ports. At night, trucks moved across the country. Crews worked under the stars to avoid attention. This was no ordinary project. It was a national secret. By the third month, hundreds of drilling teams were in place. Villagers woke to the sound of engines. Dust clouds rose over the horizon. Then came the sound they had not heard in years. Water, gushing, powerful, unstoppable. Children danced in the spray. Women filled their pots and laughed. Old men cried openly. News began to spread. "The captain has done it," people whispered. But Traoré was not finished. He announced a second phase, massive solar-powered purification plants, each one capable of processing thousands of liters daily. Water would flow through pipes to every community. No bills, no fees. The cost? Covered entirely by state mining revenues. The same gold and resources once stolen by foreign powers, now funding life for his people. It was a poetic justice. Of course, not everyone was pleased. Corporations who profited from bottled water panicked. Foreign investors called it bad for business. One multinational threatened to pull out entirely. Traoré's reply was simple: "Then leave." The people roared with approval. In rural towns, the change was immediate. Crops began to flourish again. Livestock survived the harsh, dry months. Schools reported higher attendance. In Ouagadougou, the capital, fountains were restored. Markets no longer sold overpriced water. Public taps flowed day and night. Mothers no longer feared cholera. The death rate from waterborne diseases plummeted. For the first time in decades, water was not a weapon. It was a right. Neighboring nations took notice. Delegations from Mali, Niger, and Chad arrived. They asked for advice, for partnership. Traoré agreed to share the technology freely. Meanwhile, his critics were forced into silence. The impossible had become reality. Journalists who once mocked him now praised his vision. International news channels broadcast the miracle. Burkina Faso sets global example in water access, read headlines. But Traoré stayed humble. "This is not my victory," he told the crowd. "It is the victory of every farmer, every mother, every child." He spoke these words standing beside a newly built water tower. Behind him, thousands waved the national flag. The celebration lasted days. Musicians wrote songs about the water captain. Artists painted murals of blue rivers flowing through golden fields. Even in the most remote villages, people knew his name. They called him the man who gave us rain without clouds. Children were named Ibrahim in his honor. His face appeared not just on posters, but on the walls of homes. Foreign dignitaries began visiting in record numbers. They wanted to see the water revolution firsthand, but Traoré refused to turn it into a profit show. "We will not sell our water to the highest bidder," he declared. "We will protect it for our children's children." And he meant it. Strict laws were passed to prevent privatization. Any attempt to monopolize water was made illegal. Enforcement teams patrolled to ensure fairness. This was more than policy, it was protection. Because Traoré knew that water was not just about survival, it was about dignity. Months later, an international summit was held in Ouagadougou. Leaders from across Africa attended. The topic, water sovereignty. Traoré spoke powerfully. If a nation controls its water, it controls its destiny. The hall erupted in applause. Cameras captured the moment. His words spread across the continent. Young leaders were inspired. A movement was born. Back in the villages, life transformed. Girls who once walked for water now went to school. Farmers planted new crops, confident of irrigation. The land grew greener each season. Wildlife returned to the rivers. Birds nested in the trees again. The economy began to shift. Markets were filled with fresh produce. Local fisheries reopened. Tourism even began to rise. But perhaps the greatest change was in the people's hearts. They believed again, not in promises, but in action. They believed their leader truly cared. In tea houses, elders told stories of the water miracle. Kaung people shared videos online. "Look at what we built together," they said with pride. This unity was priceless. It strengthened the nation's resolve, and it sent a message far beyond Africa, a message that could not be ignored. One evening, Traoré visited his childhood village. He walked the same dusty paths, but now they were lined with green trees. At the center stood a public tap. Water poured freely into a stone basin. Children splashed and played. Women filled jugs without fear. His mother stood nearby, smiling. "You did it, my son," she whispered. He shook his head. "We did it, Mama." They stood in silence, watching the children. For Traoré, this was the real reward, not headlines, not praise, but the sound of laughter where once there was silence, the sight of full buckets where once there was emptiness. That night, the village held a feast. Fires lit the sky, drums echoed into the distance, and the people danced, not because of politics, but because of life. The next day, Traoré returned to the capital. More work awaited him, more dreams to build. But the water project would remain his proudest achievement. It was proof that leadership could be more than words. It could be a promise kept. And a promise kept was more powerful than any weapon. It could unite a nation. It could heal wounds. It could change history. Years later, when historians wrote about his era, they would tell the story of a captain who dared to dream, who looked at the desert and saw rivers, who faced doubt with determination, and who gave his people the most precious gift of all, not gold, not oil, but water, free, pure, and flowing, forever, and somewhere in a small village. A little boy would drink from a public tap. He would not know what thirst used to mean. He would not fear sickness from dirty water. He would grow strong. And one day he would hear the story of Ibrahim Traoré. the man they called the water captain, the leader who kept his word, and the boy would smile, because for him it would never be a legend. It would be his everyday life, his reality, and that reality was born from courage. Courage to face the impossible, courage to change fate, courage to prove the world wrong. And in the end, the world did not just believe him, the world followed him.